Hi there, I'm Marny, the Director of Feline Behavior for ASPCA's Behavioral Sciences team. We've received a lot of questions around cat housing, so I'm here today to give you some cat housing tips that are really focused on research that has shown will help reduce stress, increase the quality of life of the cats in your care, decrease the spread of disease, and in turn have an impact on decreasing your length of stay. So this topic is so important because as shelters and rescue groups, it really is our responsibility to ensure our animals are receiving the appropriate care that allows them to minimally meet the 5 freedoms. So it's essential that we ensure every cat's housing environment allows for freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, or disease, freedom to perform natural behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. So I'm going to answer some questions for you today, but before I do, I want to point out a really helpful resource that I highly recommend you check out if you haven't already, and that is Guidelines for Standards of Care in Animal Shelters. This is accessible as a free PDF online. This one was, the most updated version was in 2010, but I have heard that an updated version will be coming out soon, so keep an eye out for that. This has a lot of great resources in it. It's really attempting to kind of set some standard guidelines that shelters and rescue groups should be adhering to that really focuses on looking at the research that we know of to help make sure that we're providing adequate care for the animals in our shelters and facilities. So the first question I want to answer today is a question that's come up a lot, which is, what is the best size and cage layout? So in terms of size of the enclosure, we really look to some research to help us determine what's going to be best. We want the enclosure to be large enough to allow for normal posture adjustments, as well as comfortable posturing for feeding, drinking, and use of the litter box. And we also want to make sure there's enough space for a cat to move around freely and engage in normal behaviors such as playing, perching, and scratching. And a couple of research articles that I looked to are Kessler of 1999, which found that cats housed with 11 square feet of floor space were found to be significantly less stressed than those with only 5.3 square feet of floor space. And then another study from Wagner in 2018 found that cats with more than 8 square feet of floor space in comparison to cages less than 6 square feet of floor space, as well as cages that were 6 to 8 square feet of floor space, significantly reduced the risk of URI. So the takeaway is that we really need to be making sure that our cages are larger than what they used to be. And one easy way to do that, if your cages are not of the size that I just mentioned, 11 square feet or more than 8 square feet of floor space, then you can look into portalizing your cages, which just means that you cut out a little hole in the cages to increase the amount of space. So that is here. So this cat can walk through up to 3 cages here, is what she has. And in this instance, this cage, the 3 cages together are just under 6 feet long and just under 2 feet in depth. So we're looking at almost 12 square feet of space, which is great. So really look into portalizing your cages. There are some tutorials online, and it's a pretty cheap way to increase the space for your cats. One thing I really like about portalized kennels and just larger cages in general is it decreases the risk of defensive behavior because now you've increased the options for a cat. So if something scary is happening to them or you're cleaning in this kennel, they can easily be in another kennel or move away to avoid what's scary rather than aggressing because they don't have the option of getting away. It also helps make sure that we have distance between the litter box space and feeding and water, as well as resting areas. And that's really important because another study by Bourgeois in 2004 found that less than 2 feet of triangulated distance between a litter box, resting place, and feeding area showed an adverse effect on food intake for cats. So we need to make sure that our cats are eating and they're eating well. So to do that is to really increase the distance between these spaces. So this space here allows for at least 2 feet between the litter box and the feeding area, which is over here. And she has some resting spots that are also away from the feeding area as well. Now, one other thing I want to say about cage layout and size is really that there is not one perfect type of cage size or cage housing that's going to work for every cat. So it's really important that your shelter or organization has flexible housing. And what I mean by that is that you have options. So for instance, if you have a cat that's very large or is wearing an e-collar, they might not fit through portholes. So you want to also have some large open cages that those cats could go in. And there's also cats that aren't going to do well in cages. For those cats or cats that you think are going to have a longer length of stay, you want to have options like free roaming rooms where cats can either be singly housed or group housed with other cats. You may want to utilize offices. You are going to want to have housing away from other cats in case you have cats that are sensitive to being housed near their own species. And you also want to be thinking, does this cat really need to be in our shelter? If not, can you utilize a foster? So really thinking about how can we get these cats in and out of these cages as quick as possible and in and out of our shelter as quick as possible. So another question that's come up a lot, which is, what is important to have in the cage? So a few housing necessities that I'll go over with you today all revolve around one thing, which is giving the cat choice. So for cats to feel in control, they really need choice and options, and that helps decrease stress and improve behavior. So one option is to give them places to hide if they so choose. So ideal hide spots should be hide spots that have 2 exits. And that is especially important for cats that aren't readily exiting their hide spot to approach you for positive interactions. So 2 exits are great because if you approach a cat in out of one of those entry points of a hide box and they don't want to engage, they can opt to exit out of the other hide box, which makes a less risk of them feeling cornered, less risk for defensive behavior. There are lots of hide box options out there. You can see here in this cage, we have a cardboard box, which you can see has 2 exit entry points. This little kitty had a lot of fun, but we usually like to keep these boxes covered a little bit with an extra towel. This allows a really nice snuggly den for when they want to take a nap. And the towel still allows for them to exit and enter out of each entry point. And we really like to make sure that the cats have access to fleece bedding, which is preferred. Another type of hide spot would be a feral cat den, which I think is really great for cats that are a bit more fearful or sensitive being handled, or a cat that might be handled a lot. Maybe they have a lot of medical procedures or exams that they're going to be experiencing. So let me show you a feral cat den. These are great because they also have a way to have 2 exits. So they have a porthole on the side. So a cat could enter or exit from either the front or the porthole. So I highly encourage you to keep these portholes open rather than closed when you are using them for a hide spot. And we also like to take a little towel and cover this hide box to make it more secure. If we just had it open like this, it's going to be a little bit too open for a kitty cat. Now, if you can't really fit a feral cat box in your cage without it eating up a whole lot of your floor space, or you can't even do that with a cardboard box, another thing you can do is take a towel and simply drape it over your perch or your shelf in the cage, or hang it from the ceiling to give the cat an option to hide behind that. I really like to set these up in a corner so that a cat feels secure on 2 sides. That makes the cat feel a little bit more comfortable. And I can show you an example of what this looks like. So in here we have a towel hung up, so this cat can choose to go behind it if they want, or they can come in front of it, and it's not eating up a lot of floor space. And one other thing you can do if you have a cat that is extra sensitive of movement in the room, you can choose to carefully close this You can choose to put up paper, or you could put up a towel, like drape a towel over the cage door to kind of block a lot of movement that might be happening inside the room, either from seeing other cats or to reduce them seeing cages being cleaned or a lot of commotion happening in the room. Now, aside from hide boxes, you also want to make sure that you have elevated perches in the cages. This will increase the amount of space the cat has, but it'll also give them options to perch and climb, which is something cats love to do. You also want to make sure you have a scratching surface. So a scratch pad is really great. Scratch pad should be long enough that the cat can fully stretch out on it and use it. So we have scratch pads that lay on the ground typically, but if you again are worried about this eating up floor space, you could choose to secure it to the wall of the cage if you have the space to do so. And you really want to make sure that the length of it really meets, again, their length. So they can stretch out fully. So if you are hanging the scratch pad and you have an adult cat, hang it a little bit higher so they can fully stretch out on it. Ideal litter box size and litter type is also really important. Cats prefer unscented clumping clay litter. So using like a clay type litter is going to be really important. And really making sure that litter box is of appropriate size. The ideal litter box size is 1.5 times the length of a cat. So I love to use plastic litter boxes when possible. If not, and you're using cardboard boxes, they do sell larger size cardboard litter boxes. So really opt for that larger size. I kind of talked about bedding already, but you do want to make sure that you have a few resting spots in a cage for a cat. This cat has 2 on this side, at least 1 here. That'll let the cat choose where they want to rest. We also like to add lots of bedding to the cage to help the cats control whatever temperature they prefer. And one last thing that I think is really important for what's in a cage is enrichment. So at the ASPCA, many of our facilities have baskets on their cages that all these toys belong to this particular cat, and at set times throughout the day, we rotate the toys. So it could be 2-3 times a day. We simply take out whatever toy is in the cage and replace it with a toy in the basket based on the schedule. And this helps make the toys interesting and exciting so the cat continues to play and have things that engage them throughout the day. You can also do things like viewing entertainment if you have access to a window where the cats can see outside, putting up a bird feeder so they can watch birds outside, or looking into cat TV or cat iPad games are ways that you could really increase the enrichment that your kitty is getting. Now, just as important as it is to have wonderful things in the cage for the cat, it's as important to be thinking about what's happening around the housing area. So think about what the cat's experiencing in your environment to help reduce stress. So odors is one thing that we really want to be thinking about. Cats are sensitive to strong smells, such as alcohol and cleaning scents. So make sure that your disinfectant is scent-free, use litter that's unscented, and use unscented laundry detergent. You also want to make sure that cats aren't encountering the odors of dogs if you have dogs in your facility. And if you're using scent enrichment, so if you're using scents as a form of enrichment for cats, make sure that the cat has a choice to engage with it and that it's not sprayed all over their enclosure. So maybe spray the scent on an item and put that item in the cage where the cat can choose to engage with it or not. Another important thing to be thinking about in terms of the environment is making sure that the cat has access to light and dark so they can maintain their circadian rhythm. So if your cat housing area has access to natural light, that's great. But if not, then you really need to make sure that the lighting indoors mix natural light and dark cycles outside. So that means lights coming on in the morning and lights turning off at night. And even if you do have a room that has a lot of natural light, you want to make sure you turn the overhead lights off at night, because that'll really help increase quality sleep for those animals. And one really important thing that I want to touch on is really thinking about the level of sound that is at your facility. Now, we know that hearing damage begins with prolonged exposure to sounds at 70 decibels for humans and 100 decibels for dogs. But our animal shelters are regularly exceeding 100 decibels a day. And to help you understand what 100 decibels is, a subway car runs at about 90 decibels, and a factory machine is about 100 decibels. So this is really loud sounds that is really harming ourselves as humans, but also the animals around us. So we really need to find ways to reduce the amount of sound in our shelters and facilities. A recent study by Lexi Lee discusses really trying to keep our decibel level at 30 or less, and 30 is a whisper. So think about when we're in enclosures and animal areas that we're not shouting and that we're speaking in very soft tones. What about how we run our shelter as well? What noises can we try to eliminate? Think about the foot traffic, how many doors are opening and closing, what we do with our garbage. All these things are making sounds and noises that can be really stressful for cats. So a couple of suggestions that I have, but really I ask you to look at your own shelter and see what you can do. But a few common things you can do is for metal cages, you can get plastic coated latches and hinges to make opening and closing doors quieter. For doors, if you have latches that are making a loud sound, you can get fabric to cover the latches so that they have more of a soft close. Or if those doors don't need to lock, maybe get rid of the latches altogether. And make sure you have soft closing doors so that they're not slamming. You also want to make sure that the cats are housed away from dogs so that they're not experiencing barking and other sounds that dogs might be making. Also, with food dishes and food bowls and water bowls, you really want to make sure that you're reducing the sound by having bowls that have rubber on the edges, or placing bowls on top of bedding or towel to reduce the amount of sound that they might be making, or using plastic that might minimize how much noise is making from the bowls moving around. One other thing that I find is really disruptful for cats is spray bottle sounds. So a lot of our cleansers are in spray bottles. So one thought would be to switch out your spray bottle to a squirt bottle. For your alcohol, for your disinfectant, this would allow the substance you need to come out without making a lot of noise, which can really probably increase the comfort of the cats. If you do have spray bottles and you don't have a way around that, then at least make sure that you're spraying those bottles far away from the cat cages and not in the cat enclosure to really help reduce stress. One last question that I wanted to touch on today that came up is, how can you make sure small ISO condos are more comfortable? I'm going to go back to what I said right in the beginning, which is you really have to make sure you have an appropriate size cage. So if you have small ISO cages, really look into portalizing them to increase that space. The other thing that I think is really important is to look at your practices for ISO cats. So if your standard practice is to not allow socialization for cats under isolation or not allow them out of their cages, really work with your medical teams to make sure that that is necessary. Many times you can make adjustments to these protocols, maybe by increasing PPE, increasing the amount of hand washing stations and sanitizer, to really allow these cats to get the socialization they need and the interactions they need. As research has shown that socialization as well as out of kennel time for playtime can really help decrease stress. Now, there are a lot more resources out there, and there's a lot more information about cat housing out there that we haven't gotten to today. I will be sure to make these resources available to you so you can continue to look at this on your own. We'll be putting those in the chat along with this video. If you have questions that we haven't covered today, please feel free to also put them in chat and I will get to them as soon as I possibly can. But really, I just want to thank you today for being here and really making a concerted effort for improving our cat housing. Our cats are very special to us, and really making sure that they have what they need to thrive in the shelter is so important. So thank you for taking this first step on making sure that we're doing what we can for them. Thanks so much, and see you soon.